Hello again. We're going to be doing something very important in mathematics, especially when it comes to solving polynomials. So more specifically quadratic equations, but you can make it cubic equations, etc. And what you got to do is you have to be able to factor, but before we do that we're going to try doing something called the zero product property. And the basic property says that if A times B equals 0, then either A or B is equal to 0. One of the two, or maybe even both of them, but well, let's not get too ahead of ourselves. So, when we do problems in the zero product property, first of all, they've got to be equations, like this one, and this one. And a recap on what an equation is, it's basically something with an equal sign. It's got to be equal to 0, so you got to set it equal to 0, 0, 0, and 0. And there has to be a product in between any sets of quantities that you're working with. So for example, there's a multiplication which is a product in between this quantity and this quantity. If there were a plus or a minus in between the two parentheses, you couldn't use this property. There has to be a multiplication. There's a multiplication between here and here. Technically 3n is its own quantity. And there's a multiplication sign in between the 3 and this quantity right here. So let me recap. Zero product property has to be equal to 0, and it has to be separated by multiplication signs or products. And I tell my students this, and sometimes they get confused. So the one thing you have to watch out for is make sure there's no addition or subtraction signs in between the quantities, and you can use the zero product property. So let me show you how to do this, and maybe it'll make more sense. So I've got the quantity of x minus 4 times the quantity of x plus 3 equals 0. Well, I want to figure out what x value is going to make this true. Yeah, that's it. And I mean, I suppose I can substitute and try to figure it out, but that takes forever and it's quite boring. I will tell you that there are only two numbers that will make this true. Two numbers that you can substitute in that will make this true. One of them is 4 and the other is -3. And it's not because I thought about it really quickly, it's because I looked at the problem. I used the zero product property. But if you don't believe me, let's check it out. So I said 4 will make this 0. So that means I substitute in a 4 for every x I see. 4 subtract 4 is 0, times 7. 0 times 7 is 0. And the other value I can use is -3. If I had to do this for every problem, I would have just given up. So I'm going to show you a much quicker way to do this. I'm just proving right now that it works. -3 minus 4, or -3 plus -4 is -7. -3 plus 3 is 0. -7 times 0, 0 equals 0. Both of those values will work, -3 and 4. But that's not how I teach my students how to do this. I just show them this, and people kind of groan, but you still have to show why something works. What I do instead is this. I say this, although I don't think it really makes a difference. I do zero product property. And I tell them to make kind of like a table. And I say, here's what you do. You take each quantity and you set it equal to 0. X subtract 4 equals 0. And x plus 3 equals 0. Solve for x for both of them. X equals 4 works. Or x equals -3 works. Now, some people who have done this before might say, well, I know a much faster way. So do I. But I don't like showing it because students tend to get a little too confident in their skills. And they don't practice the math, and then they make simple mistakes where they shouldn't make mistakes. And this would be an example of one. 3n, n plus 5, n plus 4. So, they're all quantities separated by products. It's equal to 0, zero product property. Zero product property. 3n equals 0. n plus 5 equals 0. n plus 4 equals 0. Go ahead and solve for n. N equals negative 5. N equals negative 4, and then if students were to make a mistake, it would be right here. How do you get the n by itself when it's 3 times n? You divide by 3. 0 over 3 is 0. Sometimes students say, well, it was 3. No. 3 times what is going to be 0? Only 0 would work. And they say, okay, I got this. I can do this. And then I say, okay, do the next problem. And they say, yeah, easily. They don't actually write 3 equals 0. They just write 3 and say, I got it. See, I'm smart, Mr. Shahadi. Yeah, that's good. You got this one right. N equals negative 2 will work. 3 does not equal 0. It's an arbitrary case. So I say, it's garbage. And I say, no, you can't use it. It's not 3 and it's not 0. There's no n value or no variable to solve for here, so this is arbitrary. It doesn't even work. Don't even use it. The only answer is negative 2. You say, well, I did it here. That's right, because it had a variable, so I had to solve for the variable. There's no variable to solve for here, so there's no answer that will work. There's no variable that you're trying to figure out. You're only trying to figure out this one. Nothing here. Garbage is what I call it. So that's a brief introduction into the zero product property. And we're going to use this to start factoring. And the first type of factoring we're going to do is GCF factoring. And then we're going to get into some really cool factoring too. But not until then. Have a good day for now. Goodbye.